Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
Great, Brian. How are you?
Doing good. Yeah, it's been an interesting day. I had to get up extra early. When I say this to clients, they're always like, "What?" I go to the hospital in order to get my blood drawn, so I was at the hospital at 4 a.m. Because they're open 24 hours, which is wonderful because you don't have to stand in any lines. You're the only one there.
That's true.
So literally, I go in, I get like 13 to 15 vials drawn, and it's like, okay, all my stuff is done for the year. All right. And I'm out the door and headed into work. And it's, it was just an extra early morning. So if I seem, full of energy and things, hopefully it'll stay up that way and not head down. I've got plenty of caffeine in my body, so I think I'm good to go.
Oh my.
So today we wanted to talk about sort of continuing the theme we had for the last couple of weeks, right? Because we had I love the title you came up with, Core Connections, when we talked about the inner core. And then last week we talked about breathing, which involved the inner core, the diaphragm especially, but also the transverse abdominis, etc. So we said, why not go and start talking about the core itself, and especially the core work on unstable surfaces.
One of the things that fitness has really embraced, like kind of radically, is physio balls and standing on wobbly boards and being in situations which require our body to reflexively respond.
Yep.
And that's really what unstable surfaces do, right? The body wants to stay in balance. It wants to not fall over. And because of that, it will generally reflexively fire the core stability muscles a little bit stronger.
Yeah. It's interesting that, when we think about how we're going to load the core, we talked about this before. We never had core classes. We had abdominal classes, ab classes, and
right.
Thousands and thousands of repetitions of crunches and all of that, and every variety. And then I don't remember when planks became the big thing, but planks was something that sort of took over that. So we're not having so much forward flexion. I understand there's reasons for it. There's reasons to flex and there's reasons not to. Totally get it. But you're right. I do remember a point in fitness when all of a sudden you'd find those big physio balls in
everywhere.
Studios.
Yep.
And it was sort of like, I think the company I think Spry was one of the first ones to really come out, and they were called Swiss balls. And I don't know if they're from Switzerland or whatnot, but I just remember they were called Swiss balls. And I remember getting them in my mom's studio, and I had to inflate them. So it was sort of like, what is this? And they were super popular. And then you go to gyms and they've got tons of these.
Yeah.
Tons of them. We actually had in my mom's studio classes on them because we had an older clientele, and we would have classes. So we literally would have 10 to 15 of these balls hanging from netting from the ceiling, hung up on the on the ceiling to keep it away, and you'd pull it down and you'd pull all the balls out and they'd be bouncing all over the room. But I remember those classes, and there were so many things you could do on them to engage your core for exercise. And it was great.
Yeah. And so they're physio balls or Swiss balls. Again, they start out as Swiss balls, and there's something about teaching kids, I know something. Anyway, the history of those, I was remembering the first place we had to buy them was actually this was, 30 plus odd years ago, was a kind of a supply store for educational materials. And a lot of this was used for developmental work on kids.
Sport time.
Like that. Yeah, that was or something like that. That was the first place that we actually got to buy them. They weren't available through the fitness vendors when I first was buying them. I remember
as soon as you said that, I remember the catalog. Being in Hawaii, we didn't have a place. So we had this thick catalog, and you're right. It was all for kids stuff, stools that they would kneel on and scoot around the room, pulling it with their arms and
Right.
and all of that, all the stuff that PE teachers would be buying. And you're right, that's where we first probably saw them.
That's where we first had to buy them, because I remember we got excited about it at St. Francis, and we're like, oh, we want to buy a couple of these. And there weren't a lot of vendors actually for physical fitness stuff at that point. So that's where we had to buy it from.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. So why did these guys work? So thinking about working on an unstable surface, there's a good bit of research on this as well. What basically happens is, again, that increase in reflexive response. So if I'm lying flat on the floor and I'm doing toe taps, or I'm doing a little dead bug, right? Opposite arm and leg lifting up off the floor, it's pretty easy to stay stable because the floor isn't moving. Right. And there's no pull from the floor. Like my hips or my arms may be destabilizing my torso, but my torso is essentially on the floor, right? No problem. You do the exact same thing, for example, lying on a foam roller or on a fit ball, and it changes everything. You feel it much more, right? The sensation goes up a lot. It's much more work. One of the things I often say when I put a client on unstable surface is their nervous system wakes up. Exactly. And you can tell that because they shut up and they start to really concentrate.
Their eyes get big. You're right. Like, okay, yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. They're lying on the ground doing it. They're like, yeah. They're telling you about their weekend, the movie they just saw, whatever. You put them on a roller or a spine fit or any number of other strange devices, and like they become silent.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And you can see their whole body changes.
Yes.
Because they're lying down on the ground and they're in a very relaxed position. And if you're having them do something like marching, it's simple, relatively. Once you teach them how to do it properly, keeping their spine stable and everything, it's fairly simple.
Yeah.
And then you put them on even a half foam roller.
Yes.
Even with the flat side up, so they still have the same type of stimulation as the ground, physically.
Yep.
They're now on that unstable surface. They're really on basically a teeter-totter at that point. Laterally, that all of a sudden, you're right, their hands immediately grip the ground and their shoulders start hunching forward. You're like, okay, relax. You don't have, you're 3 inches off the ground. You're not 3 feet. You're going to be okay.
Exactly. Fall off and nothing will hurt.
Exactly. But you definitely can. And you're right. It wakes up their nervous system. It gets that neurostimulation. A bunch of episodes ago, we talked about, the fact that certain exercises do challenge our nervous system a lot more than others based on, if you're in a machine that dictates your path of motion, all your stability, you're not having to work very hard. Right, whereas you do something like a squat, a lunge, a pull-up, a push-up, you're controlling a lot more because you are the one controlling everything from stability to movement to resistance, the whole shebang. Exactly. So your nervous system turns on and is heightened. And because of that, man, it's going to light you up a lot more and you're going to get more out of it.
One of the people that I worked with, Daria Bronston, who was the creator of the motor, one of Balanced Bodies things, which is basically a roller with some resistance devices attached to it, right? Very simple device. But she worked with a biomechanics lab down in Santa Barbara just to check and see what was happening with this. And she would do essentially dead bugs, so marching, lying supine, one leg up, other leg up on the floor. And they did EMG stuff to test her transversus and other muscles. And then they did it with her just lying on a roller. And then they did it with her lying on a roller, holding on to the resistance bands or the resistance tubes or resistance straps, I guess, that she has on the motor. And with each of those steps, the core activation, the muscular activation of the core went up. And they've seen this in many other studies too. That was purely just a one moment kind of thing, but that's true in different studies. So going onto unstable surface increases that activation of the core all the way around. One of the things too is we talk a lot about anti-rotation exercises, or maybe we haven't talked about it much on this podcast, but there's this concept that sometimes how we train stability is by training it to resist rotation. So you put a rotational force into the body, like Brian's favorite is like, let's say my hands are straight out in front and I'm holding on to a band, and you as the person are pulling on that band. Yep. And that client is trying to resist you pulling on that band. Hopefully that made some sense.
Yep. Or so even if I side or something, your arms are out, it's coming from the side, and it's you're trying to resist that pull laterally.
Exactly. Right. So you're trying to keep yourself stable. Well, forces want to pull you sideways.
Yep.
And many of the unstable surfaces, particularly something like a longitudinal unstable surface. And what I mean by that is like a roller, the motor, or what we call a spine fitter. Again, full roller, half roller, something where your spine is supported from head to tail. And basically what you're trying to do is stay on that thing, whatever it is, against, let's say, the rotational components of your leg moving out or your arm moving out or moving asymmetrically, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. And I found that over the years, and I don't know if it was just in people wanting to do more balance training, but I started seeing a lot more classes dealing with unstable surfaces, whether it be the ball or the Bosu was really big. It still is really big.
Yeah.
Foam rollers, balance pads, all of these sort of, and they call them balance tools in the vernacular for fitness a lot of times, but really they're unstable surfaces. You're creating instability from the ground, or, you know, if you're in a push-up position in your hands, because, you know, a wobble board, for instance, we talked about a BAPS board, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the ankle. You could put that underneath your hands.
Right.
And it creates instability laterally or in 3 dimensions, both.
Right.
And you can really feel your core engage a lot more. You could do it with a suspension trainer as well.
Right. Yep.
You know, and change the angle. So it's super easy, super hard doing a plank, you know, using, you know, with your arms and the straps of, you know, the Bode or TRX, whatever suspension trainer you use. And that creates, as soon as, again, you come off that natural, you know,
upright
vertical
position.
plane, upright position, and go more horizontal, everything suddenly goes, whoop, I got you.
Right.
I got you. I got to hold you together now. But yeah, when you're talking about that whole anti-rotation, a lot of times, for me, I do it through physics. My brain sort of thinks physically through physics and kinesiology. It's like, okay, where's the resistance coming from? And in a lot of times when we're talking about unstable surfaces, it's coming from the ground. It's coming from gravity. Okay. And it's changing your center of gravity by either moving an arm, moving a leg, being on something unstable, but adjusting where that center of gravity is. Because you could be lying on a foam roller and lift one arm in the air. Well, on a small level, you know, a few inches, your center of gravity suddenly starts to move over a little bit as you lift that arm up because your weight on that side increases. And all of a sudden, oh, my core has to engage in order for me not to roll over that direction.
Right.
Much like if we're in a quadruped position and we, you know, lift one of our arms up in the air so our chest doesn't hit the ground and we don't rotate, our spinal muscles, our core has to engage to keep us in neutral state, you know, and it's a great anti-rotation position. But really what you're using is you're fighting against gravity. You're changing where your center of gravity is.
Yes. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of unstable surfaces, because I think it's interesting whether there's essentially one plane that's unstable or multiple, like the difference between a roller and a fitball, for example. Yeah. So with something that's just unstable in the side to side direction, if you're, let's say you're on a roller from the head to the tail, full roller, half roller, spine fitter, lots of options there, right? That is really going to work specifically on that rotational stability.
Right.
To keep you, because basically the body doesn't want to roll off or fall over. But it's also only working in that plane, more or less, right? In the transverse plane, more or less, if that's how you're lined up. So that gives you, I find that those are the easier ways to do things. If I'm progressing somebody on unstable surfaces, maybe like that, those are often the easier ones to start with, because there is that sense that they're only having to deal with instability in one plane.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Also thinking about clients with low back injuries or other kinds of things, that's often where I start, because there's less likelihood that they'll be really wiggly and like super unstable in a bunch of different planes, which can often cause the body to kind of tense up like especially if I've got a back issue or something like that. So I'm a little cautious with that. If we compare that to something like a Swiss ball or a fit ball, whether it's the big ball or whether it's even like a small ball under the hips or under the torso, like one of the smaller, like we call them togu balls, or there's lots of different versions of those, like the bender balls, another version of those, lots of different things like that. Those have more three-dimensional instability.
Yep.
Right. In all dimensions. So it just requires a little more refined motor control and proprioceptive feedback to stay stable in those kinds of surfaces.
I find that going along with the Togu ball, Dynadiscs.
Yes.
I get them so that they're almost perfectly not flattened, but some people like to overinflate them. Don't overinflate them.
They're not puffy. They're flat.
No, they're flat.
Little squishy.
Right. Put one under the shoulders, put one under the hips.
Yeah.
Because, your low back in general has that natural arch that you do that and you put something under the head to support the head, and you'll really see that there's not only the lateral, but your shoulders and your hips are going to be having that three-dimensional, capability in a small way.
Right.
So it's small. You're not doing it as much as you would if I use two Bosu balls, which are, much larger. So it begins to engage those muscles on a smaller level so that you find they are sort of almost that incremental, micro adjustments that are necessary in order to keep, as you lift an arm or doing whatever you're going to do, marching, opposite arm and leg, whatever you want to do. So I find it's a good transition from the foam roller to take it and let's add a little more of that additional planes of motion. So
one thing I'm thinking about, and again, Brian and I are thinking about this as we're talking about it. So here we go. When you're on a roller or you're on something like that, the tendency is, particularly a roller, right? You lift an arm up and their whole body's going to want to rotate in one direction.
Yep.
Right. What you're talking about with the two, we call them whoopee cushions a lot of times, actually, but disco sits or Dynadiscs, whatever they are, right? If you've got something like that, you're also then working on the stability between the upper and the lower body.
Yeah.
Right. So you're getting more of that actual coordination between the upper and the lower, because the hips may be rotating left and the torso may be rotating right, and your body's got to pull both those things back together. Yep. So, I would say that has a stronger influence on refining the core and its relationship to the upper, the upper body, the ribs and the pelvis, that all those things have to go together. And that really helps to bring that together.
And what I find that you can also do is take it and separate the two. For instance, just having it be under the rib cage. And you could do anything like bridges or anything where the hips are off the ground, and then it's coming from a little higher up, or just put it under the pelvis, which we do with the Togu ball a lot. And you're getting a lot more of just that pelvis instability because you have something already on the ground with the rib cage being there. So we can refine that even more if we want to regress that or challenge them in a different way. And I'm all about changing the challenge. So not just doing the same thing over and over, because once your body figures it out and becomes efficient at it, it's got to be challenged. You got to do something else.
When we talk about core work generally, one of the things that I find can happen is, like you said, just doing the same thing. Like people get proficient at a lot of basic core work. Not everybody gets proficient, but if they do, then they can pretty much do it without thinking about it. And they're no longer challenging the core, right? I don't know about you, but I kind of remember the very first time I laid prone over a fit ball and did an opposite arm and leg reach. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like, oh, that's really different than doing it on all fours. But that is a whole
much harder,
way harder. My whole nervous system's lighting up. Like this was a thing.
Yep.
And that's where the core has to then be challenged in a higher way. And that makes it stronger. That makes it more responsive. That makes the motor control better. That makes it better able to handle unusual circumstances, the little dog running under your feet, or ice under your feet, or something coming at you, right? It just allows you to respond more easily and more gracefully, and the body to know how to do that better. I mean, I think that's the goal anyway.
It becomes very reactive. Something that I like to do with clients is the statue exercise, where you're sort of pushing, on clients from various ways, but it's similar to that in that your body, it has to respond to the environment it's in. You lift up an
Yeah.
arm, you lift up a leg on the foam roller or on a Bosu or whatever, or when you're in belly over the ball, lifting up even one leg at a time, suddenly their whole body shifts and you're, oh my gosh, how do I balance this? Or lifting up an arm or lifting both arms, and suddenly my face is going toward the ground. Oh, I got to shift my body back. I have to adjust this. Your body responds and reacts. And like you said, that's for real life.
Yes.
Because we do need to respond. If you've ever tripped over something, and all of a sudden you trip and you're thinking, oh my gosh, the response should be that you step quickly and catch yourself with your other foot or whatever.
Right.
But again, sometimes that's delayed. And the next thing you know, you're face down.
Yeah.
Wondering, how'd I get here?
Right.
Or the little dog running underneath you or whatever, picking up your grandchild, whatever it is. The classic example that you and I give all the time is picking up a wiggly baby or a wiggly dog. When you pick up a wiggly baby, all of a sudden that 15, 20 pound baby suddenly feels.
I'll be back. Hang on a second.
Well, that little baby or even a dog. If you've ever tried to pick up a cat that doesn't want to be picked up or a dog that doesn't want to be picked up and they're
they're squirming like mad.
Oh my gosh, your core is lit up like crazy.
Oh yeah.
And they feel 10 times heavier than they really are. You're thinking, how does this, 5-pound dog now feel like they're 30 pounds because they're moving all over the place.
Exactly.
Exactly. And that is that reaction. You need to be able to respond accordingly to whatever life is thrown at you.
Yep.
And what we do by training is to train for that.
Right. And that's the goal of core training, right? Yes. Is to create that reactivity, to create that strength and that coordination. I think about working with some of the older folks, and you see their tentativeness with something as simple as leaning down to pick up their purse or reaching over to pick something up, right? There's a tentativeness and that they're not sure their body's going to be able to do whatever that is. And really when you train it, like the body just gets more confident. It's like, oh yeah, I can handle this. I can handle this. I can handle this.
Yep.
So one of the things that I really do love about unstable surfaces too, we've talked about being supine on them, right? Lying on a foam roller, lying on the Dynadiscs or the disco sits or the whoopee cushions, lying on a ball or a physio ball. You've also got things like Bosu and things where you stand on an unstable surface.
Yep.
Right? Either the flat side or the round side, depending what you're doing, or they've got like these little balance pods, which are essentially like a squishy foam. Yeah. So that's looking at balance from a different perspective and an unstable surface for a different purpose, right? Standing on an unstable surface with your feet.
Yep.
And then what does that do, right?
Some of the things that I like to challenge people with is not only standing, but you can also do it kneeling, sitting, all of these things done on these unstable surfaces. And the reason why I bring these up is before we get into some of the more difficult things, because as soon as you stand, you're involving every single muscle in your body, basically, in order to establish that balance.
Yeah.
For my older clients, before I'll ever put them on a ball, you can put them on a stool with a Dynadisc and just have them sit on that.
Yep.
And I'll even just have them reach an arm.
Yep.
And I showed you years ago having people kneel and play volleyball with them, and throw the little ball, beach ball. And they'd have to reach and hit it back and hit it back. And every time I did, I'd throw it a little bit farther. So they'd have to reach further and further or reach overhead. So they're challenging their core in a lot of different directions.
Yep. And reactively,
because they don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't throw it the same way every time. So, and again, you can start them in a chair before you ever on a Dynadisc or something, even like a Togu ball that's been mostly flattened.
Yep.
And then take them from there and have them sit on the ball.
Yep.
Because now that's really going to be unstable, but they're still in a seated position. So it's not as challenging as suddenly standing, because when you take that to that next level and have them stand on the Bosu, I remember the first time I stood on it, man, was that difficult. My body didn't know what the heck was happening.
Right.
Could not figure it out. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but I like to flip the Bosu over so the flat side is up sometimes and have them just stand on it. Yeah. And I might have them do squats or something like that, but just standing on it. And you can always see their brain trying to figure things out. Cause when they first get on it, they do this.
Yeah. Kind
And
of a fast back and forth. Yep.
they can't
Like,
their brain can't figure it out. And it's going back and forth and they're laughing because like, what's going on? You didn't do this. What's happening? And you can see it's going super fast. And then you can see as their body starts to figure it out, it slows down.
Yeah.
Usually within a set or two.
Yep.
Sometimes it may take a couple of sessions, but their brain sort of says, oh, okay, you just want me to do this. And it sort of begins to react evenly.
Yes.
And it's not so wobbly back and forth, side to side or forward and back.
Right. Which is, if you think about it, is coordinating the balance response between the two sides.
Yeah.
Right. Because it almost feels like when they first do that, that they're trying, like right side dominating, left side dominating, like who's in charge here?
Mm-hmm.
And they really have to get it so that both sides are in charge and they're communicating more like across the midline, if you want to think about it that way.
Yep.
And you also think about that for like one of the people that I work with was a surfer and a bicyclist, and has just a really good sense of balance between both those things.
Sure.
Right. He was a surfer as a kid for a long time, many, many years. And then, as a bicyclist now, and I give him balance challenges, and it's like, not that it's no problem, but I could really move him up. Like he trains balance 3 or 4 times a week doing something.
Yep.
His wife, who I also work with, doesn't do any of that. And it's like the difference in the two of them in terms of balance is profound. And a lot of it is just training. And balance is one of those things that training makes all the difference, because it is a multi-sensory skill. It's eyes, ears, the whole vestibular system, the whole proprioceptive system. Like there's a lot of pieces to the balance system. And they get trained more, I would argue there's some muscular component, but a lot of it's neurological, is just coordinating.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be something too challenging even for someone. Even standing on, a lot of times I'll just have people start by standing on, one of those Airex type pads, the squishy pads.
Yeah, like
the big
a little
squares.
Spongy thing. Yeah,
exactly. You can get them cheap off.
They're not very unstable.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they're not.
They're quite, if you're on 2 feet, they're really not. But just have them stand on that and then take one arm out to the side. Yeah. And again, shifting that center of gravity over laterally as they lift that arm up. And suddenly you can see they start to lean, and it's like, don't lean, stay. And they're going, oh, okay. And it's not a big challenge. But again, starting them, a fair shoulder width stance, and then I can bring them down 2 feet right next to each other. And then it's more of a challenge. I think, oh, okay. And then you can put a small weight in the hand or whatever. And suddenly it becomes more and more of a challenge. And again, we can start, regress it to something that's easy, especially for our clients who may need more balance training or, establishing that sort of proprioception in their body so they know where their body is in space, and then begin to increase it. But by doing that, suddenly their core is lit up like crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it has to be the side that's staying still. I mean, if I lift my arm up my right arm up, my left side is going to respond, and that core is going to be active. Yeah,
absolutely. One other thing about balance that I always say when I start to work with clients like this, because they kind of, at least some of my clients are like, well, why can't I just stay still? Like, why can't I find the balance point and stay there? And that's not how it works. Balance is truly dynamic. So what I often encourage clients to do when they feel that instability, let's say they're supine on the stability ball, right? Their torso is supported by the stability ball, their feet are on the floor, and they're doing a march from there. Pretty challenging exercise, right? And they'll like lift one leg up, and they'll start to get it, but they'll feel like, why can't I just stay still and do this? And it's like, that's actually not the point. And sometimes what I'll really have them do is, let's say, lift the right leg up, feel that weight shift to the left, put that leg down, lift the leg up, feel that weight shift. Don't exaggerate it, but just be aware that the body needs to do those adjustments. And so make those adjustments a little bit conscious if you can. Yeah. When they start to get familiar, it's like, okay, I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to engage a little more on that right side as I lift that left leg to keep myself from falling over, whatever it is. And I often say, like, let's train the dynamic nature of your balance support.
And that's the word right there, dynamic. Because we're not static creatures. We're almost always in motion, or we should be in some respect. So when we are walking, where we are getting groceries out of the car, when we are just doing whatever, our bodies are in motion. And when you put them on something that has like a balance pad or a BOSU or whatever, I get the exact same thing. Why can't I just find that balance point? Why can't I just stay still?
Yep.
I've been doing this for years. So for me to get on there, I look like I'm staying still because from my waist up, I pretty much am. And I'll tell the client, look at my ankle. And my ankle,
and it's like doing a little,
it's a little wobbly.
Little
and they'll
wobbly.
go, oh. And I'll say, just because it's sort of like I say, it's kind of like the duck on a water, you know, top can't tell it's moving. At the bottom, man, those legs are going. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel my ankle and my legs shaking like crazy, but my upper body can stay nice and relaxed. And I say, it's a dynamic exercise. You have to respond and react to what's happening to you. And it's all about training that to happen on a subconscious level and not a conscious level. You want it to happen automatically. Boom, it happened.
Yep.
Not, oh, I want this to happen, I'm going to tell my leg. No, we don't work like that. If you do that, you're going to end up on the floor.
Exactly. That's too short. That's too slow reaction time to actually respond to something unexpected.
Yeah. And when we are doing the core in that regard, I love people sitting on the ball and marching or doing a leg extension.
Yep.
Because their core, they have no idea how much they're using it.
Exactly.
And they're thinking, oh my gosh. And there's a series that I like to do on the ball, and I can put this online, is just have them sit on the ball. Already they're going to feel like, okay, I'm a little unstable. And then I say, okay, just tuck and tilt your pelvis forward and back, tuck and tilt.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, tucking and tilting.
Yep.
Small. I don't make them go too far.
No, and then it doesn't matter.
Now side to side. I was like, ooh, that's a little harder. And you can usually see one side's better and easier than the other. One side's a little glitchy. And then I say, okay, now do the hula. I want you to do circles.
Ah, nice. Yep, exactly.
And when they do the circles, you can really see their eyes get really big. And sometimes they have to hold on to the ball and they're trying to figure out how to do it. But it's because they're asking their core muscles to work in coordination with one another in something that they probably have never been asked to do. I find women are usually a little better than men. Men look very, very stiff at this, just because they're not used to moving as fluidly unless they're, an athlete or something like that, and they may not have moved in a while. Women usually tend to get it a little sooner than men do, but it's still a challenge for them to be able to do that. And then I can have them do marching, because as soon as you lift one leg off the ground, oh my gosh, everything has to kick in.
Yeah.
But just sitting on the ball, those simple exercises,
you
can engage everything and really get the body to respond. And for those clients that are trying to rehab from a back injury, just having them work with that range of motion forward and back, side to side, and circles can work on mobility as well as core strengthening all at the same time.
And finding, so after all that, it's like, then they also find their center point. Like we talk about neutral spine all the time in whatever field you're in, but that's a thing like that. They're actually finding their neutral point.
Yes.
Through that, right? Because they'll find they tuck under. Okay, that feels like too much work here. That feels like too much work there. That's unstable there. That's unstable there. And they find that place where it's like, okay, that's where I want to be. That's the place that feels the most balanced, front, back, inside, outside. Yeah.
Yep. And then you can always load that, because you can hand them a band, a tube,
in one
lateral
hand,
raise,
in
a
both
row.
hands.
Exactly.
A symmetrical exercise, an asymmetrical exercise.
Exactly.
One other thing too, in thinking about this is, I find that the easiest way to challenge somebody, if you think about progressions, whether they're on the roller, on the ball, whatever situation they're in, is in the sagittal plane.
Yeah.
For example, both arms coming up, both arms coming down. If they're on the ball or they're on the roller, whatever, is the easiest. Generally, right? That they can generally organize. Sagittal plane is pretty easy to organize. So something in flexion and extension is better. As soon as I go out to the side, even just one arm out versus the other arm out asymmetrically, that's when the challenge comes in. So that's how I progress, right? Starting sagittal bilateral and going to either sagittal unilateral or going into more like full frontal plane or transverse plane. Those things increase that challenge. It's just another thing to think about there.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you add that lateral resistance, it's going to challenge them a lot more. And what you're going to see, especially if they're on a ball,
Yeah.
is when the arm comes up, you're going to see their hips want to shift.
Yep.
Not only does their body want to lean the opposite way, but their hips are going to want to shift because they're trying to figure out, their body is trying to figure out, their brain is trying to figure out, how do I coordinate this? How do I balance this?
How do I stay centered? How do I not
How do
fall
I stay
over?
centered? Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is they're going to lift and they're going to shift out and their whole body's going to go, whoa, 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 wait.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take a second for them to get that center again.
Yep.
And I highly recommend, if you try and do this with a client, lightweight, arm alone by itself, a lightweight to start. Too often we have a tendency to think, well, you can do a lateral raise with 10 pounds. Well, guess what? We'll do 8 on this. No. That's going to be a big challenge.
Start with nothing, then go to a pound or 2 pounds, start light, because it's a completely different thing. You put somebody in an unstable surface and honestly, their ability to move weight goes down dramatically.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was aware of working in the Pilates environment is I had a client come in who really wanted to do essentially weight training on the reformer, which is not the best environment for it. And what was really interesting was we would do things like, let's say, essentially a chest press. So, straps coming from behind, pressing the straps forward. And what was interesting and useful on that was if they were sitting on a bench, something stable, right? And they had cables coming from behind, they could push a lot, right? They had a good amount of, because they had the stability of sitting. And in this case, they're sitting like in one of those chairs with like some support for the back, and the surface wasn't moving.
That's the big one.
That's the thing. As soon as I put them on the box, I was sitting on the short box because I want them sort of sitting up, and they couldn't sit very well otherwise. They're sitting up on the short box and they're pulling. Now they have to engage their core to stabilize that resistance, because number one, the carriage is moving, and number two, they don't have any support for their torso. And the amount of resistance that they could actually push was down. I would estimate it was down about 2/3.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. So if in the gym, if they could do 60 pounds there, they could do maybe 20 pounds, something like that. And it was just interesting to note. So when you go to unstable surfaces, that's when I'll often take the weight down dramatically from what they can do in a stable environment.
Yep. I love the reformer. If I need their core to get it to fire, doing rows on the reformer. And everybody assumes it's going to feel the exact same as doing it on the machine or our cable, our bands, whatever. And they go to pull, and I have to remind them, you're going to fall down if you just yank. So, I have them just feel what the resistance feels like. Feel the erectors. They're holding you up. Okay. Because I usually have them do it kneeling, just because it gets their glutes engaged and their hips engaged a little bit more, just for a little bit more stability. And then I say slowly row, because if they yank, their body's going to topple. And so I really have to watch and get close to them, because I may have to catch them. And again, what I love about the Pilates environment is the more core, the less resistance I put on.
Yeah, exactly.
If I put on a ton of resistance, well, all they have to do is lean into it.
Right.
Whereas you put very little resistance, and all of a sudden their core is having to engage like crazy as they pull, because they pull too far. Suddenly there's no tension on the line, and they're going beyond that point of tension. And then they're going to have to catch themselves. So then it's like, okay, smooth it out. We can use the core line. I've used a lot of sliding type of tools for that, because you can really get them to feel their core working. I have something called a hero board, which is basically, think of something you would want to, move something with, those furniture movers, those 4-wheel dollies.
A dolly?
But the wheels, it's a dolly, but the wheels are fixed in one direction, so they don't twist.
Yeah.
I like the ones that twist. Those work really well, and I've got different varieties of that. But the ones that have the fixed actually help, because the wheels aren't twisting and turning, which can make it a little
weirdly unstable
when it goes backwards. And having them do a pull on that or a push on that with their body moving, man, that changes everything.
And it's really why, I don't know, there's a lot of reasons for this, but it's one of the reasons why I think the Pilates environment does the core so well. Is because you have that moving surface underneath you. And, if you just think about doing a plank on the reformer, or if it's long stretch, right? Your feet are on the shoulder rests, your hands are on the foot bar, and you're moving in and out in your plank position. It's way harder than doing that on the floor, right? Just because the core has to work completely differently to support you and keep you, especially if you do that on a yellow spring, that's all core all the time, because you really don't want to go splat. And so those kind of things are really, I think, a lot of the power of the Pilates environment is the fact that you are unstable. Again, it's not going to get the same level of ability to push heavy weight, but it's going to integrate the core with the weight. And that's really where you want to have more functional components, right? Is that you've got the core strong enough to deal with the weight that you're putting into it.
Yeah. You and I have talked about that before, that, I've had clients that have, done weight training with me and then decided to, take a break and go do Pilates, which I'm highly go for it. Please. I love Pilates, and please go and do that. But when they come back, a lot of times they've lost a lot of their strength. Their core strength has gone up. Their core coordination has gone up, but it's changed. It's definitely different, because now they're not getting that amount of weight and resistance from the reformer, or especially if they're doing reformer classes, but it's not the same. People who say, oh, the reformer is the same as a leg press. It's like, no, you're maxing out at a certain amount of weight. I can put them on the shuttle or a different leg press, and the weight can be 10 times heavier.
Right. Absolutely.
It's definitely more about getting that core coordination, the core strengthening, the core stability, all of that, which the reformer, is unparalleled in.
And Coraline as well, for those of you who have that, it does the same kind of work. Exactly. So this is where every fitness modality fits into a certain part of the fitness continuum, if you will, right? We talk about doing mat work, which is great for clients who don't have any equipment and are happy to do homework, right? Awesome. And you don't need toys, you don't need anything. Very accessible. Then you have all the little props and stuff that we've talked about, right? Really increasing that core work, giving new challenges and giving new excitement. Clients love toys. That's the other thing. Right? You can have a client do something on the mat, like, you have them do the exact same thing. And I've done this before, lying on the reformer. They're still doing mat work, but they're on the reformer and they're way more excited, even if they're not using the actual reformer. But then you put them on a ball or a roll or whatever, and it just increases that up. And then all the toys and tools we have that at a higher level to really help to increase that.
Yep. I highly, highly recommend. I just got a new piece in from Bosu. That's basically, imagine a push-up bar of some sort that's curved perfectly to go on top of the Bosu, that gives you handle positions.
Nice.
And when I first saw it online, when it first came out, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, I looked and I was like, well, heck, I can do that with something. I can basically do that with a wooden dowel on top of it, just side to side. So I was like, there's a special. They were practically giving them away. So I was like, all right. I love getting new toys because I'm going to play with it in ways maybe they don't know. And for my clients, it's just something new, fun, and different that's going to challenge them in a different way. And I may use it for 6 months and then put it in the closet and not use it again for 2 years. I don't know. I've done that many times. Or it goes to the storage unit, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, interesting. I remember that. That was really good. I love that. Why is it in here? So I highly, highly recommend, taking it, when you go to a fitness conference, when you go to one of these things, play with all the toys. Play with everything. Does something stimulate you or stimulate your creativity? And again, it doesn't have to be in the way that it was ever designed. You can be as creative as you want to be, but it can be fun, and that's my whole thing, is just keep it fun. And more props, the better. When the Spine Fitter came out, I was like, yes, I have to have one now. And my clients just ate it up. Was it that much different than being on half a foam roller? A little bit. It stimulates it differently. But we could do all the same exercises, and it felt so much different to them, and they loved it. And suddenly it added variety. It added something of a new stimulation and a new, their brain was working differently again, woke them up. And it was fun.
And so I just want to piggyback on that a bit, because one of the things that we love about props, again, waking people up, our bodies literally learn to do exactly what you tell them to do. So, and for better and for worse, I mean, honestly, it was like, my example of that is, working Pilates forever and ever and ever. And then I got a Coraline where people are upright and they're still on an unstable surface, but it's reciprocal, right? But the two carts move independently with somebody standing upright, so they can do something very different than they could do on the reformer. And I had a client who I'd been working with for like 8 years. I thought she was looking really good. Everything she could do, all her reformer repertoire really well. Put her on the Coraline, and the same postural pattern that I remember from our first session was right back.
Yeah.
And I mean, the good news was she could manage it much more quickly. Like I could then refine it in an upright position with reciprocal leg motion much more quickly. It only took a few sessions to really get that organized. But it's like, wow, no, you can lie down and move your legs on the foot bar really well. That doesn't necessarily mean you can stand up and do a squat, or you can stand up and do a lunge, or you can walk comfortably, you can run comfortably. So, that's part of the fun about unstable surfaces, is just challenging people in different ways to maintain that neurological alertness, and also just to train the body for all kinds of different things. So they're not just getting stuck in whatever rut they're in.
Yeah. Anytime you change, you can do the same exercise on 4 or 5 different apparatuses. And every time you change, you're going to see that. You're going to see all of a sudden, their body's like, what, huh? And again, they pick it up a lot faster than they would when they were completely uninitiated.
Yeah.
But it's still challenging. I did this to a client 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I just saw the BOSU in the background, and I'm going to be honest, I was bored. It was online.
Right.
She's in Florida. Things. I'm here in DC, and I was just looking for something different. And I said, grab the BOSU, because I was going to have her do opposite arm and leg. And usually we do it over the ball, or we do it quadruped. I say, grab the BOSU, kneel on that on hands and knees. She's small, so she could fit pretty easily. And just getting her there, she's all over the place.
Flat side? Are you on the flat
No,
side?
on the rounded side.
Round side. Okay. Yep.
So she's really unstable. She goes, oh my gosh. And I could just see everything. So, I had to get her in the right position, and then eventually got her to do opposite arm and leg, but it took a little while. And she said, that was one of the hardest things you've ever had me do. And I was thinking, okay. Again, with a tall person, might be a little awkward to be on something that small, but for her body, it worked perfectly. And again, it was just adding that variety and challenging her in a way that it was different.
Yeah.
You could do it on a bench for some of the guys. Suddenly it's more narrow, and they're going to have to grab on differently. And oh my gosh, how am I supposed to, modify this? So there's a lot of different ways you can do it that you can still get their body to, give them some challenge while keeping them stimulated.
Right. Exactly. And one thing I do want to say is, if you're working with clients with injuries, because Brian and I often talk about that, I am cautious with unstable surfaces, because that wibbliness, that wobbliness can often cause, if somebody's in pain or they've got muscle spasms, other kinds of things going on, can cause their body really tense up, and can not always be good for sacroiliac joint instability or low back instability, or hips or necks or that kind of thing. So just be cautious with that. Just as a final word there, be a little careful with your clients with injuries when you start to put them in unstable surfaces. It may be good in theory, but it may not be good for them.
Exactly. It's something that you really want to, if you're going to put that in your repertoire for them, that's down the road. That's way down the road.
And you're going to start slow with one version, like lying supine and doing some marching on a roller. See how that responds. If that's okay, give them that for a couple of weeks and slowly progress up.
What I found is, for that progression, going from the ground to the foam roller is a huge step up for some people.
It is. So half row foam roller is better.
Spine fitter is even better.
Yeah.
It's wide enough. It's not as tippy.
No, it's not tippy.
For my own body, I can actually lift my arms and legs off the ground and do, traditional dead bug on there, because I've got decent amount of balance, but I could never do that on a foam roller. It's way too unstable. So I find it's a good in between for a lot of people. So it's just something to think about. If you've ever had a client, sort of jerk, or yourself, that when you're trying something new and suddenly you yank something, or they lift up their leg too much, or they go into an exercise way too fast, that's what's going, and then they say, ooh, my back didn't like doing that. And you're like, well, you shouldn't have. that grabbing. Well, you shouldn't have done it that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen on an unstable surface
Yeah.
because their body's going to try and figure out how not to fall down.
And it'll often respond very quickly and sharply to something, or something will just grab. And that's what you want to be careful with.
Exactly. Sharp is the perfect explanation because it's like boom. And that's what that's when we can see, spasm or just lights them up in a way that we really don't want, So again, starting them off slowly, working your way up, even just having them sit on the ball could be a challenge before you have them do anything.
Exactly.
Just sitting on it. A lot of people who have been in the fitness industry for a long time. I mean, I can walk out into until just my head and shoulders are on the ball, walk on the way back. Ask someone who doesn't know what they're doing, how to do that. And it's a big challenge. Now, someone who has some back injury, that's going to be a big challenge for them. So again, take it slow, take it easy, take your time. I have a client who has a lot of issues, and I mean a lot of neuromuscular issues, and is going through a lot of stuff. And I told her at the very beginning, I said, we are going to take this so slow. I want you to think of the word glacial.
Right.
Because anytime she's tried to get fit in any way, shape, or form, and she's done everything from yoga to Pilates to fitness, she's always hurt herself because she tries too hard.
Yeah.
And even at a normal pace of a physical therapy unit, it was too much, and it always caused her body to, go backwards. So literally it was, okay, we're going to march with the help of springs to lift the leg, because she couldn't even lift her legs in a supine position.
Yeah.
So it was that sort of deconditioning, but it's been a year and a half, and now she's doing lunges and squats and all sorts of things. Her body's responding well, but it takes time. So again, don't be afraid to take your time with those clients.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid to take your time before you put them on something unstable. But when you do, make sure you keep them. This is something I want everybody to keep in mind. When you put someone into an unstable environment or unstable surface, they need to be safe.
Yes.
They need to feel safe. We have something called a gait belt that we use. It's basically, you can use a regular belt, but something that goes around them that has loops on it. And if you look on Amazon or wherever, you can find it. But it gives me an opportunity that I can hold on to them if I need to, when they're doing any balance work or anything. It just helps them be safe. Or I put them in front of a ladder, a wall ladder, so that they have something to hold on to let them feel that they have some security, because that is something that they really need to feel safe in order for them to do the exercises correctly. If not, all they're going to do is tighten everything up, and you're really not going to get what we want out of it.
Exactly.
So keeping them safe, keeping them, mentally safe as well, so they feel secure, really can help.
Perfect. Well, there was a wide-ranging discussion about unstable surfaces. Hopefully we've inspired you a bit just to think about that if you're not already using them, or maybe think about them differently. If you only use rollers, or you only use the Bosu or something, just think about all the different ways that you can challenge a client. Again, keeping them safe, but challenge a client. I find them really fun. Clients really love them. And it really keeps clients coming back too, is the other nice thing about it. Gives them variety for simple things.
And I'm going to post online on our Instagram some of these exercises. I'll do the ball, and I'll also introduce you to the spine fitter, just so you can see what it is. You can get it from Balanced Body. You can get it, I think that's even on Amazon. So there's a variety of ways you can find them. And they're a wonderful tool. So I'll do that so you guys can see visually. Thank you guys for joining us. As always, you can always hit us up on all of our socials. We're becoming much more active in that. Hey, look at us. We're actually coming into the 21st century. You and I, we're actually, trying to be a little bit more into, social media and things. We're getting better. We're not great at it by any means, but we're getting better. So at Moving Convos on Instagram and Facebook primarily. Movingconvos@gmail.com is a way if you want to give us some ideas, give us some thoughts as to what you'd like us to talk about. Great way to get in touch with us. And please like, subscribe, hit all those things. We're also on YouTube now, so you can see us. We're actually, in case my hands are all over the place, Italian blood in me. I can't can't sit still. But you can actually watch us and whatnot, and hopefully it's a little more engaging. So check us out on YouTube as well. And yeah, I think we've covered it all.
All right.
All right. We will see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Bye, guys. Yep. Have a good one.